Nostalgia is often referred to as a longing for distant memories of the past. Although this is true, there are certain ways in which one thinks about nostalgia in order to make sense of the past and not shy away from downing it, or totally reconstructing the past and protect that version of history that we accept as knowledge. Svetlana Boym discusses these definitions as two types of nostalgia, reflective and restorative. In this paper, I will be focusing on restorative nostalgia through analyzing Don and Betty Draper in the first season of Mad Men and George and his good friend Charlie in the movie A Single Man. Don Draper does not deal with his traumatic past by recreating a persona for himself, while Betty Draper lives a life that is tragic and oversimplified. George has lived through the last 8 months dealing with the trauma of getting over his partner. Through this time, he just lets time happen to him and appears surface level to everyone in his life, much like his good friend Charlie, who acts as a person that she is not. I argue that people are inherently very surface level and live their lives through oversimplified reconstructions and would prefer to simply avoid their harsh pasts due to the pressures of contemporary media and avoidance of true history. It is important to first examine the theories that demonstrate surface level thinking. First, Boym discusses the phenomena of restorative nostalgia. She describes restorative nostalgia as a yearning to rebuild the lost home and patch up gaps in memory. Although this has the great intention of recreating the past as a wholesome memory, it can be harmful to do so without critically examining the effects of this imagined reality. Boym also discusses the concept of invented tradition that lives inside restorative nostalgia. This concept introduces societal pressure to maintain former sets of customs that contain accepted and normalized behavior from the past. Boym writes that invented tradition, quote, can also be politically manipulated through newly recreated practices of national commemoration with the aim of reestablishing social cohesion, a sense of security, and an obedient relationship to authority, end quote. Boym argues that restorative nostalgia not only focuses on the individual rather than the community, but also can be manipulated through politics and contemporary media that creates a sense of safety with its followers and viewers. This sense of safety comes from being able to recreate a lost past where one can relive the special moments and ignore the hardships. And having this safety blanket, people can disregard trauma or rebuild their past with invented circumstances. Contemporary media mimics this sense of safety. It distracts viewers from the truth of history in order to make life and entertainment more consumable. Another key concept central to this argument is that of S.D. Krystowska's capitalist nostalgia. Krystowska defines capitalist nostalgia as the selling of our connection to the past. She explains that, quote, these same opportunities excoriate the remembrance and with it the things remembered, their autonomous life in our memory beyond any justification and benefit. End quote. Contemporary media takes away the reality of our memories and exploits them for consumerism. This type of nostalgia is essentially the selling of retrievability. Reliance on the media as a replacement for our own thoughts and memories is dangerous. It becomes a war between contemporary media and our brains. Krystowska warns that, quote, gradual estrangement from our memories suggests we are losing the art of decipherment. Likewise, excessive nostalgia affords us the means to ignore the radically unfamiliar and turn away from blank, unclaimed futures, end quote. Krystowska relates capitalist nostalgia to Boym's restorative nostalgia through this quote. She explains that because of media and capitalism, we can selectively choose the comfort we find from the past. We can choose to restore our past in a way that is built on recycled or sold surface-level memories, rather than examine and analyze why the past was the way it was. Contemporary media also produces through the lens of the victor in what Walter Benjamin describes as historicism. Benjamin describes historicists as whoever has emerged victorious participates to this day in the triumphal procession in which the present rulers step over those who are lying prostrate. End quote. The way that contemporary media selects the history it creates entertainment about elevates those who run society and are seen as the winners of history. This distracts the viewers from being able to tell the difference between fact and fiction due to only one main written history. All of history up until the last few decades has been written by white men, So this allows for misconceptions and falsities about our futures, or about the history of our own country, since it was only written in one perspective. Benjamin writes, quote, "To articulate the past historically does not mean to recognize it the way it really was. It means to seize hold of a memory as it flashes up at a moment of danger," end quote. The danger threatens the effect of time and reconstructions of the past. Through the contemporary media and people who oversimplify and go along with the victor's form of history, we do not see the true version of history. In historicists' point of view, it is dangerous to hold a memory that brushes against the grain of history because it has the ability to change the historical narrative and the status quo. Historicism, like that of capitalist and restorative nostalgia, is a way of thinking that is negligent in critically examining the real past. Instead, it focuses on surface level reconstructions. Mad Men is a show created in contemporary times that captures 1960s nostalgia. The main character, Don Draper, works for an advertising firm in New York as the creative director. Although he is very inventive and successful in this position, Don's personal life is very surface level. He is unable to deeply reflect on his distressing past because he is constantly set back by his troubled upbringing, wartime trauma, and problematic marriage. Don Draper holds a fake identity that he stole from a man who died in the war. This fake identity keeps Don distracted from actually examining his past by creating an imaginary present. In being an ad man, he does the same thing for the public, create an invented present. Boym writes, quote, "The danger of nostalgia is that it tends to confuse the actual home and the imaginary one. In extreme cases, it can create a phantom homeland. Unreflected nostalgia breeds monsters," end quote. In creating this imaginary world for himself, he never reflects on his past until it comes to him through his brother or strangers that he knew in his past life. Even when this occurs, he does not critically think and expose how these past events have affected him. He also creates this imaginary world through his work, advertising cigarettes as safe, or that life is carefree and that buying things will make you happy. Because of the pressures of his livelihood, work, and other outside sources, he lives the oversimplified life of the everyday American in the 1960s. Whenever something comes up from his past or something stressful appears in his life, he avoids it and turns to drinking or womanizing to evade truly feeling. However, he is a deeper character who has a lot of trauma, and this is the truth that contemporary media is trying to avoid portraying through forms of entertainment. An example that displays this disconnect from reality is the relationship that Don has with his real brother, Adam Whitman. As a child, Don Draper was Dick Whitman, an illegitimate child. After the death of both of his parents, he was raised by his stepmother, who treated him cruelly because his existence reminded her of her late husband's unfaithfulness. Adam is first introduced after Don wins an award and his picture is printed in the newspaper. Adam comes to his office, and after much hesitation, Don agrees to go get lunch with him. Adam is so happy to see him, but Don is visibly upset because he spent so much time ignoring and forgetting about his past. He is irritated because he has spent so much time reconstructing his past to block out the trauma that it brought him. Don wants so badly for everything to go back to being simple that he gives Adam $5,000 to leave and never come back or talk to Don again. As Don's imaginary world begins to deteriorate around him, he turns to drinking and womanizing to forget the bit of authenticity that entered his life. Boym writes, quote, "What drives restorative nostalgia is not the sentiment of distance and longing, but rather the anxiety about those who draw attention to historical incongruities," end quote. Don does not feel anxious about avoiding his past, as he pressures others to avoid their thoughts and feelings about their past through his work on advertising. He feels anxious when someone comes back into his life to bring attention to the inconsistencies in his past and call out that he is living in an imaginary world. This makes him so nervous that he becomes more surface level and does not care about the outcomes of any situation as long as it benefits him. Not reflecting on his past has made him into a selfish man who creates situations that solely benefit him because he does not realize how much the past can affect the present and future. Another character that promotes surface level thinking is Don's wife, Betty Draper. Throughout season 1, Betty's character is very tragic. She is a housewife who is not happy in her life and puts on a fake front to everyone around her. Below the surface, Betty is an anxious woman who needs love and attention but cannot get it from anyone around her, not even her husband or family. The only person who gives her the attention and love she wants is Glenn Bishop, the son of a single mother, Helen, who lives down the street. Glenn is the same age as Betty's daughter, which makes every scene we see the two of them together deeply uncomfortable and disorienting. Glenn serves as a reflection of Betty's deep loneliness and isolation. In one of their first interactions, Betty gives Glenn a lock of her hair, which is deemed as inappropriate by Helen. When Helen confronts Betty about this, Betty slaps Helen across the face. This scene is very upsetting because it shows how lost Betty is, that she cannot relate to anyone on a real level. Moreover, she does not realize that giving a young boy a lock of her hair is wrong. By not confronting the major problems in her life, like not being able to do what she wants to do with her life due to getting married and having children so young, or the obvious issues with her marriage, she is unable to see that this is the wrong person to feel affection for. She is blinded by the seemingly perfect world around her that she constructs a reality where the only person who truly understands her is a young child. Betty struggles with the oversimplification and surface-level reconstructions. Through the many problems that she faces in her friendships, her relationship with Don, and her personal life, she seems to just let it brush past her without thinking about it twice. She relies on surface-level interactions to give her a moment's worth of happiness and attention, making her a simple and tragic character who only cares about herself. Krystowska explains, whatever the past redivivis, it is valuable insofar as it confirms us in our current existence. No matter what emerges from the past, it is only valuable if it confirms the things we want confirmed to make ourselves feel good. Betty does not critically reflect on the emotions of her past and reconstructs it only to momentarily feel good about herself and her life. She turns to finding contentment in commercialized items and empty compliments. For example, receiving a bracelet from Don makes her believe he cares about her mental health. Going out to dinner and socializing with Don's coworkers' wives makes her appear popular, young, and happy. Hearing compliments from Glenn keeps her mind at ease. A Single Man is a contemporary film also created to highlight 1960s nostalgia. Through a surface-level lens, nostalgia is felt through the outfits, cars, and speech styles of the characters. From a deeper view, the main character, George, suffers from not reflecting on his past because of outside pressures, like his job or hidden sexual orientation, that force him to act complete at all times. George experienced the death of his partner, Jim, 8 months before the present day in the movie. When he realizes that there has been no one who has cared for him, or that he has not felt any sort of happiness through this time period, he decides that he has spent enough time without Jim and wants to commit suicide. Throughout the movie, we see that there are so many people who should make George feel cared for, like his friend Charlie, his student Kenny, or even the stranger who tries to sleep with him. Benjamin writes, reflection shows us that our image of happiness is thoroughly colored by the time to which the course of our own existence has assigned us. End quote. In scenes where George interacts with these people, we see a shift of coloring in the filmography, which offers a sense of George's inner feelings, that he is seemingly critically reflecting on his life and realizes that there is some happiness left. His dull and surface-level reality is colored through muted tones that are juxtaposed with scenes of vibrant golden shades in the rare moments where George feels a reason to stay alive. His life is momentarily saturated with warmth and love, but he ignores these sentiments because he is too far gone in his decision. He has lived these past 8 months being ignored. The warmth fades away as quickly as it happened. He becomes a person with tunnel vision, focusing on only his feelings and emotions and not caring about others' opinions. George comes across as a person who keeps to himself. He keeps his personal life very separated from his work and everyday life. The only glimpse into his personal life the viewers see is through flashbacks to his life with Jim, the only person in his life who mattered. George is a gay man in the 60s. Through this aspect of his life, he is viewed as invisible to the whole world, and therefore gets used to being seen in this light. It seems as though he does not want any meaningful interaction, which is noted by him ignoring Kenny's advances and trying to cancel plans with his good friend Charlie. He tries to be unseen in this world and remain closeted to all but his partner and close friend, yet he chooses to live in a glass house. Thus, the secrets of George's life, like him crying for his lost love or attempting suicide in a lot of different positions, are hidden in plain sight. At the time, society and contemporary media showed a strong sense of homophobia. Placing George in this glass house was a symbol of liberation, to be able to show who he really is with no care for whoever sees. If it weren't for the death of his partner, he may have been able to live this carefree life. Instead, he continues to hide by using blinds and staying away from the window, and lives the simple reconstruction of his life that he had before he met his partner. Similar to George, his friend Charlie also displays a simplistic lifestyle plagued with selfish thinking and naive reconstructions of her past. Charlie is a tragic character, and much like George, she has had her fair share of traumatic events in her past. Instead of reflecting on them, she decides to ignore them and construct a present day that is surrounded with contemporary lifestyle choices. Krystowska explains that historicist delights and privations determine the price of longing for the past and continually expand the possibilities of its manufacturers. End quote. Here, Krystowska points out how in longing for a past where one feels and looks young is mainly rooted in the themes of contemporary media. Charlie is influenced by the media through her choice of makeup, dress, and music taste. And by doing so, she avoids facing the reality of seeing an aging woman staring back at her in the mirror. The main scene that Charlie is in is when George comes over to her house and the two of them spend a couple hours together on New Year's Eve. As George walks into her house, she tells him her New Year's resolutions. Quote, "No more talk about awful ex-husbands and children who don't give a damn," and "more smoking and more drinking and screw it all," end quote. This mentality is harmful to Charlie, as she later reveals that she is jealous of the love that George and his lover have, that she has never had a real love for anyone. To avoid her true history of failed marriages and children, she drinks, smokes, and tries to seduce George into restoring their life together in England. Benjamin writes that, much like Charlie, our image of happiness is indissolubly bound up with the image of redemption, end quote. Charlie believes that she would be able to find happiness in being in a relationship with a man who she knows to be gay, and return to a place where she once lived in hopes that everything would be the same. Returning to a former home would bring her nothing but more grief and despair, as nothing would be the same as she once left it. Being in a relationship with a gay man would bring her no satisfaction in the areas of her life that she needs it. Also is a selfish outlook, as she knows that George is struggling deeply with the loss of his lover. Although they have a little argument about love and how dramatic Charlie is, Charlie still believes that it would be a good idea to leave together, as she kisses him deeply goodbye. Due to the pressures of contemporary media pushing her to be young and find love and avoidance of her history with men, we can assume that she continues to live this surface level lifestyle where she believes the best way to go about life is to, quote, "screw it all," end quote. As evidenced by these two forms of entertainment, there are certain ways that people reconstruct their past in order to protect their version of history. These people are usually simple, selfish, and choose to avoid their past rather than build their character through traumatic events. Don and Betty Draper are two tragic characters who are living in an imaginary world. Don through a total reconstruction of his past through a different man, and Betty through reconstructions that make her appear whole and happy for the masses. George and his friend Charlie both create simplistic renditions of their lives by hiding their true emotions of sadness and jealousy through surface-level relationships and lifestyles. By not critically analyzing their pasts, people can be influenced by the contemporary media or avoid their true history by living their lives through surface-level and oversimplified reconstructions.